the 7th session of the Senate in the first regular session of the 17th Congress is hereby called to order. Senator Joseph Victor G. Ejercito will lead us in prayer.
Let us put ourselves in the holy presence of the Lord. Our Father, thank you for the gift of today. Thank you for calling us to serve this great nation. As we fulfill our mandate, help us to fulfill your will. As we represent our brothers and sisters, help us to listen to their real and immediate needs. Guide us so that we may cultivate a culture of looking after the most neglected, those who have no power and the least privileged. Our Father, help us during our country's trying times. Help us preserve this nation through nurturing our children and the youth. We call upon you to bless us as we solve the country's problems on drugs, criminalities, and corruption. Use this humble chamber to be fair, humane, and just as we pass the crucial legislations that will shape this nation. Bless us so that we will not rely solely on our knowledge. Help us to always seek your wisdom. This we ask in the name of Jesus Christ, your Son. Amen.
Thank you, Senator J.V. The Secretary may please call the roll.
The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Ontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Poe, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Soberi, Senate President Pimentel.
With 22 senators present, the Chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, the journal of the 6th session, Monday, August 8th, is not ready. It will be ready at a later hour. So I move that we defer the approval.
Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Before the reference of business, may we acknowledge some guests of our colleagues, guests of Senator Recto from Pasig City College, Pasig City, Iloilo, led by Dr. Eljit Fernandez. Also, Liga ng mga Barangay sa Pilipinas, Attorney Abisamis, the President, Mr. Marquez, the Auditor, and Mr. Zuniga, the Secretary, and Liga ng mga Barangay sa Pilipinas, also Barangay Captain and Councilors of Barangay Santo Domingo, Orion, Bataan, headed by Chairwoman Lolita Solana. I'd like to welcome them to the Senate, Mr. President.
Welcome to the Senate to all of our guests.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Is there an objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
551, an act providing for a mandatory labeling of polyvinyl chloride and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Trillanes IV.
Referred to the Committees on Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship and Health and Demography.
552, an act defining and regulating the travel agent's profession by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Tourism and Justice and Human Rights.
553, an act regulating the practice of mining engineering in the Philippines, repealing for the purpose Republic Act numbered 4274 as amended, entitled Mining Engineering Law of the Philippines and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation.
554, an act creating a sick leave bank for government employees, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation.
555, an act to provide for a framework in the care and treatment of diabetes, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Health and Demography and Finance.
556, an act establishing the Philippine National Maritime Museum, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture and Finance.
557, an act instituting a driver education program, providing the implementing guidelines therefore and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, and Public Services.
558, an act to require certain vehicles, carriages, traversing main and secondary roads to use reflectors, providing penalties therefore and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Public Services.
559, an act providing for a more responsive and comprehensive regulation for the practice, licensing, and registration of environmental and sanitary engineers in the Philippines, amending for the purpose Republic Act 1364 and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation.
560, an act to strengthen the recycling program for all rechargeable batteries manufactured, sold, and distributed in the Philippines and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Environment and Natural Resources, Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship, and Finance.
561, an act to promote and develop the Philippine mango industry, creating for this purpose the Philippine Mango Industry Development Board, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Food and Finance.
562, an act regulating harbor pilotage services and the conduct of harbor pilots in all ports in the Philippines, and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Public Services.
563, an act to establish the National Research, Development, and Extension Center for Pineapple, authorizing the appropriation of funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Food, Ways and Means, and Finance.
564, an act creating a coffee research, development, and extension center, authorizing the appropriation of funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Food, Ways and Means, and Finance.
565, an act providing for the registration, licensure, and practice of food technology in the Philippines, providing funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
566, an act providing a Magna Carta for provision and parole workers, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights, Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
567, an act protecting the environment, thereby establishing a basic policy for nature restoration, providing funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Environment and Natural Resources, and Finance.
568, an act providing for the collection, transportation, and recycling of electronic waste and cellular phones, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Environment and Natural Resources, and Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship.
569, an act renumbering all existing district engineering offices of the Department of Public Works and Highways to conform and correspond with the numberings of the legislative districts throughout the country by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Public Works.
570, an act expanding the number of disorders included in the newborn screening program and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Health and Demography.
571, an act proposing the creation of the Philippine Bamboo and Rattan Center to conserve, propagate, and promote bamboo and rattan species, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Food and Finance.
572, an act establishing Children's Savings Account Program and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality.
573, an act creating a carnap prevention program, establishing a carnap prevention advisory board, and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs and Finance.
574, an act transferring the Philippine National Police Academy and Police National Training Institute from the Philippine Public Safety College to the Philippine National Police, amending for the purpose Sections 66, 67 of Republic Act Number 6975 as amended. Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance.
575, an act to provide time off with pay for employees who donate organ, bone marrow, blood, or blood platelets. Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, and Health and Demography.
576, an act to require country of origin labeling on prescription and over-the-counter drugs. Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Health and Demography.
577, an act promoting government agency performance excellence. Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation.
578, an act requiring the concurrence of the Senate of the Philippines in any international agreement, providing for the deployment abroad of Philippine military troops, whether for peacekeeping missions or combat operations, pursuant to Article 7, Section 21 of the Constitution. Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Foreign Relations and National Defense and Security.
579, an act providing for a Magna Carta of Government Accountants.
To the Committees on Civil
Senator
Service,
Trillanes.
Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
580, an act providing for the regulation, supervision, and professionalization of the practice, licensing, and registration of sanitarians. Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
581, an act requiring the use of seatbelt devices in school services, amending for this purpose Republic Act numbered 8750, otherwise known as the Seatbelts Use Act of 1999 by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Public Services and Education, Arts and Culture.
582, an act strengthening and rationalizing the career service of the Congress of the Philippines by establishing a legislative career service and a legislative academy for other purposes. Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Accounts, Ways and Means, and Finance.
583, an act institutionalizing a pre-hospital emergency medical care system, providing for the establishment, supervision, and regulation of the pre-hospital emergency and providing funds therefore. Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Health and Demography and Finance.
584, an act amending Section 31 of Republic Act number 6770, otherwise known as the Ombudsman Act of 1989, as amended, allowing private lawyers to act as prosecutors on behalf of the Ombudsman by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
585, an act creating the Philippine Center for Duck Research and Development to promote the Philippine duck industry and for other purposes. Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Food and Finance.
586, an act establishing a farm machinery manufacturing program and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship, Agriculture and Food, and Finance.
587, an act establishing one-stop action center for purposes of land registration in every legislative district throughout the country and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Environment and Natural Resources and Finance.
588, an act establishing a program for public education on prostate cancer. Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Health and Demography.
589, an act creating the Philippine Commission on Autism Spectrum Disorders and the Office of Autism Services. Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Health and Demography and Finance.
590, an act authorizing the court to require community service in lieu of imprisonment for the penalty of aristum minor, amending for the purpose Chapter 5, Title 3, Book 1 of Act Number 3816 as amended, otherwise known as the Revised Penal Code, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
591, an act to provide for the establishment of a forensic DNA data bank, the taking of DNA samples, forensic DNA analysis, and the use of DNA profiles and information in relation thereto and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs and Justice and Human Rights.
592, an act regulating the practice of plumbing engineering in the Philippines, amending for the purpose Republic Act numbered 1378, otherwise known as an act to regulate the trade of master plumber, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation and Finance.
593, an act prescribing every second Sunday of September as a National Coastal Clean-up Day in the country, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Environment and Natural Resources and Finance.
594, an act establishing the Academic Excellence Foundation to promote academic excellence in public and private schools and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture.
595, an act providing for a national cervical cancer diagnostic and treatment fund, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Health and Demography and Finance.
596, an act to provide for a national folic acid education program to prevent birth defects, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Health and Demography and Finance.
597, an act to establish and maintain an Office of Veterans Affairs in the Philippine Embassy in the United States of America, prescribing its functions, providing funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on National Defense and Security, Foreign Relations and Finance.
An act, 598, an act establishing marine protected areas in all coastal municipalities and cities and for other purposes, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Environment and Natural Resources, Agriculture and Food and Finance.
599, an act is strengthening the forfeiture powers of the state, amending for the purpose certain provisions of Republic Act number 1379, otherwise known as an act declaring forfeiture in favor of the state any property found to have been unlawfully acquired by any public officer or employee and providing funds and providing for the proceedings therefore introduced by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
600, an act providing for stiffer penalties against public officials and employees who refuse or neglect to act promptly on the public's personal transactions and communications as required under Republic Act 713, otherwise known as the Code of Conduct and Ethical Standards for Public Officials and Employees, Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation.
Additional reference to business bills on first reading. Senate Bill number 601, an act providing for tax exemptions and subsidies for the local music industry, amending for this purpose certain sections of the Local Government Code of 1991 by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Local Government and Ways and Means.
602, an act requiring all government agencies, instrumentalities, local government units, and government-owned and controlled corporations and private establishments to use security watermark paper in all receipts and invoices, permits, licenses, clearances, official papers, or documents by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
603, an act prescribing rates of pay and allowances for officers and enlisted personnel of the Armed Forces of the Philippines while on overseas duty with the Philippine Expeditionary or Peacekeeping Contingent pursuant to a Philippine Cooperative Commitment or United Nations sanction or policy and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committees on National Defense and Security, Foreign Relations, and Finance.
604, an act expanding the scope of the practice of midwifery, amending for the purpose Republic Act Number 7292, otherwise known as the Philippine Midwifery Act of 1991, and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
605, an act providing for the condonation of unpaid interest, penalties, and surcharges on loans secured by farmers, fisherfolk, and agrarian reform beneficiaries from the Department of Agrarian Reform, the Department of Agriculture, the People's Credit and Finance Corporation, the Cooperative Development Authority, the National Food Authority, and the Kedan and Rural Credit Guarantee Corporation by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committees on Agrarian Reform and Agriculture and Food.
606, an act prescribing fixed terms for the Chief of Staff and the Major Service Commanders of the Armed Forces of the Philippines and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committee on National Defense and Security.
607, an act declaring the conferment of the doctorate degree as equivalent to entry-level career executive service officer eligibility in the civil service by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, and Education, Arts, and Culture.
608, an act providing for the retention and utilization of the income derived by the National Museum, amending for the purpose Section 26 of Republic Act Number 8492, otherwise known as the National Museum Act of 1988 by Senator Trillanes D4.
Museum Act of 1998.
1980.
To the Committee on Education, Arts, and Culture.
609, an act to promote and support the development and growth of the Philippine film industry, creating for this purpose the Philippine Film Commission, defining its powers and functions, and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committees on Public Information and Mass Media, Ways and Means, and Finance.
610, an act granting disaster service volunteers a paid leave during period of disasters by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, and Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development.
611, an act requiring all government agencies issuing identification cards, certificates, and licenses to indicate therein the blood type of the holder and providing penalties for violations thereof by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
612, an act strengthening the rights of foreigners to lease private lands, thereby repealing Republic Act Number 7652, entitled an act allowing the long-term lease of private lands by foreign investors, and Presidential Decree Number 471, entitled fixing a maximum period for the duration of leases of private lands to aliens by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
613, an act granting the Supreme Court the power to reassign trial court judges to other branches of the same level, thereby amending Section 17, 18, 30, and 31 of Batas Pambansa Bilang 129, otherwise known as the Judiciary Reorganization Act of 1980 by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
614, an act requiring the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation to provide coverage for the diagnostic services for breast and cervical cancer, providing funds therefore and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committees on Health and Demography and Finance.
615, an act requiring all franchise grantees using wires and cables in the operation of their business within the Philippines to place their wire and cable connections under the ground, providing penalties thereof and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committee on Public Services.
616, an act imposing reciprocity as a requirement before allowing foreign nationals to practice their professions in the Philippines to protect the interests of Filipino professionals and for other related purposes by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, and Foreign Relations.
617, an act authorizing the use of the special fund to finance the maintenance, rehabilitation, and replacement of energy infrastructure in preparation for and in response to natural and man-made calamities, as well to finance direct subsidy for energy consumption by end users in case of market failure, thereby amending Section 8 of Presidential Decree Number 910 by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committee on Finance.
618, an act prescribing urgent measure necessary and proper to effectively address the electric power crisis and for other related purposes by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committees on Energy and Finance.
619, an act regulating the practice of fisheries profession in the Philippines, creating for the purpose a professional regulatory board of fisheries and appropriating funds therefore by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation and Finance.
620, an act establishing a performance-based accountability system for public education and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation and Finance.
621, an act to give juridical personality to the present Veterans Memorial Medical Center and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Government Corporations and Public Enterprises, Health and Demography and Finance.
622, an act providing for a highway safety program in the Philippines and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Public Services, Public Works and Finance.
623, an act to amend certain provisions of Republic Act Number 7431, otherwise known as the Radiologic Technology Act of 1992 and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation.
624, an act amending Section 8 of Presidential Decree Number 910 to allow the financing of energy-related expenses of the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the use of the Special Fund by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on National Defense and Security and Finance.
625, an act imposing more stringent penalties for the crime of alarmist scandal, amending for the purpose Article 155 of Republic Act Number 3815, otherwise known as the Revised Penal Code as amended, and for other related purposes by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Public Order and Dangerous Drugs.
626, an act reverting to the national government the discharge of basic health services devolved to local government units and repealing for the purpose pertinent sections of Republic Act Number 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991 by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Local Government, Health and Demography and Finance.
627, an act to strengthen the architecture profession, amending for the purpose certain provisions of Republic Act Number 9266, otherwise known as the Architecture Act of 2004 by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation.
628, an act creating the position/rank of Fire Truck Officer, FTO, in the Bureau of Fire Protection by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation and Finance.
629, an act regulating the practice of chiropractic care in the Philippines by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation and Finance.
630, an act recognizing the British School Manila as an educational institution of international character, granting certain prerogatives conducive to its growth as such, and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture.
631, an act strengthening the Philippine Comprehensive Policy on HIV and AIDS prevention, treatment, care, and support, repealing for the purpose Republic Act 8504, otherwise known as the Philippine AIDS Prevention and Control Act of 1998, and appropriating funds therefore by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance.
632, an act creating the Philippine Trade Representative Office and appropriating funds therefore by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship, Foreign Relations, and Finance.
633, an act expanding the grounds for declaring a person a nuisance candidate, thereby amending Section 69 of Batas Pambansay Bilang 881, otherwise known as the Omnibus Election Code by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation.
634, an act upgrading the benefits and incentives of barangay tanod members who have rendered at least 1 year of service in the barangay government by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Local Government and Finance.
635, an act providing for a 20-year barangay development program, appropriating funds therefore for other purposes by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Local Government, Economic Affairs, Ways and Means, and Finance.
636, an act providing for the Code of Military Justice for the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Philippine Coast Guard, repealing for the purpose Commonwealth Act numbered 408, otherwise known as the Articles of War as amended, other special laws, and appropriating funds therefore by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on National Defense and Security and Finance.
637, an act granting benefits and privileges to former presidents and vice presidents of the Philippines or their surviving spouses, amending for their purpose Republic Act number 5059, repealing Republic Act number 2087, and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, Ways and Means, and Finance.
638, an act setting the limits on the power of the President to reappoint bypassed nominees by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes.
639, an act to establish the Food Safety Administration within the Department of Health to protect the public health by preventing foodborne illness, ensuring the safety of food, improving research on contaminants leading to foodborne illness, and improving security of food from intentional contamination, and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Health and Demography and Finance.
640, an act removing the conditions for the condonation of all unpaid taxes due from local water districts, amending for the purpose Section 289-A of the National Internal Revenue Code as amended by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
641, an act establishing the Philippine Service Reform Code and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation and Finance.
642, an act granting night shift differential pay to the government employees, including those in government or controlled corporation, and appropriating funds therefore by Senator Trillanes IV.
The Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation and Finance.
643, an act amending Section 450 of Republic Act Number 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991 as amended by Republic Act Number 9009, allowing the conversion of a municipality which has a land area of at least 50 square kilometers or inhabitants of at least 25,000 into a component city if it has an annual average locally generated income of at least 250 million pesos for the last 2 consecutive years based on 2012 constant prices by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Local Government.
644, an act instituting the Philippine Railway Authority and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Government Corporations and Public Enterprises, Public Services, Ways and Means, and Finance.
645, an act removing the restrictions under Section 118, 119, and 121 of Chapter 13, Title 6 of Commonwealth Act Number 141 on agriculture free patents issued under Section 44 thereof by Senator Paulo Benigno Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources.
646, an act providing a framework for citizen participation in the legislative process through the use of the Internet and for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Science and Technology and Public Information and Mass Media.
647, an act mandating the development of the National Sustainable Transport Network Plan and the creation of local bikeways office in all local government units, promoting the shift to sustainable modes of transportation and for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Public Services and Environment and Natural Resources and Finance.
648, an act providing additional assistance to overseas Filipino workers by amending Republic Act Number 8042 as amended by Republic Act 1022, otherwise known as the Migrant Workers and Overseas Filipinos Act of 1995 by Senator Paulo Benigno Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Labor, Employment and Human Resources Development and Foreign Relations and Ways and Means.
649, an act granting benefits to non-regular employees of the government, amending for this purpose Republic Act Number 8291 for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation.
650, an act regulating the production, sale, use, recovery, recycling, and disposal of plastic bags, promoting the use of reusable bags, providing mechanism for the recovery, collection, and disposal of plastic bags and for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Environment and Natural Resources, Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship and Finance.
Second additional reference to business, Senate Bill Number 651, an act establishing the National Coastal Green Belt Program, providing funds therefore and for other purposes by Senator Paulo Benigno Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Environment and Natural Resources, Climate Change, and Finance.
652, an act institutionalizing a Philippine Bamboo Industry Development Program by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, Ways and Means, and Finance.
653, an act providing for the tax relief in times of calamity by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Ways and Means and Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development.
654, an act exempting from taxes all donations, grants, or gifts to non-stock and non-profit educational institutions by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
to the Committees on Ways and Means and Education, Arts and Culture,
655, an act establishing a Philippine high school for sports and appropriating funds thereof by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
to the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, Sports and Finance,
656, an act mandating ship owners, ship crew, and concerned government agencies to provide for and ensure safety of passengers at sea, providing penalties for violations thereof and for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
to the Committee on Public Services,
657, an act on mandating the creation of a mental health program for the adolescents and youth and local government units and academic institution by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
to the Committees on Health and Demography and Finance,
658, an act providing for enhanced social protection for the working poor and providing funds thereof by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
to the Committees on Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, Government Corporations and Public Enterprises and Finance,
659, an act strengthening the Local Development Council, amending for the purpose certain sections of Republic Act Number 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Act, Local Government Code of 1991, and for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
to the Committee on Local Government,
660, an act amending Republic Act Number 7227 as amended by Republic Act Number 9400, otherwise known as the Basis Conversion and Development Act of 1992 by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
to the Committees on Government Corporations and Public Enterprises and Ways and Means,
661, an act recognizing and institutionalizing indigenous people's educational systems within the Philippine educational system, establishing the guidelines for the accreditation, management, and evaluation of IP schools, and appropriating the necessary government funds, financial assistance, incentives, and support therefore and for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
to the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, Cultural Communities and Finance,
662, an act institutionalizing the grant of student fare discount privilege on land, water, and air transport utilities and for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
to the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture and Public Services,
663, an act assigning one registered nurse for every public school in the Philippines by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
to the Committees on Health and Demography, Education, Arts and Culture and Finance,
664, an act reorganizing the National Commission on Culture and the Arts into the Department of Culture and the Arts, defining its powers and functions, appropriating funds thereof, and for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
to the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation and Finance,
665, an act to promote the development of the bamboo industry in the Philippines and amend certain provisions of Executive Order 879 that created the Philippine Bamboo Industry Development Council, expand its mandates, provide additional personnel and regular budget of the Secretariat of the Council by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
to the Committees on Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship, Ways and Means and Finance,
666, an act declaring the National Indigenous Peoples' Day as a non-working holiday, amending for the purpose Republic Act Number 10689, otherwise known as an act declaring August 9 as National Indigenous Peoples' Day and mandating the meaningful observance thereof by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
to the Committee on Cultural Communities,
667, an act to prevent harassment of tourists by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
to the Committees on Tourism and Local Government,
668, an act amending Republic Act Number 6848, also known as the Charter of Al-Amana Islamic Investment Bank of the Philippines, and providing for the regulation and organization of expanded Islamic banking system in the Philippines by Senator Aquino IV.
to the Committees on Banks, Financial Institutions and Currencies and Ways and Means,
669, an act to support rural development in the coconut sector by establishing the Coconut Farmers Trust Fund, providing for the management thereof and for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
to the Committee on Agriculture and Food,
670, an act classifying the sale of electricity by generation, transmission, and distribution companies and electric cooperatives and the services of franchise grantees of electric utilities in sale or importation of machinery and equipment directly used in generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity as value-added tax-exempt transactions, amending for the purpose sections 100A to paragraph 2 and 109 paragraph 1 of the National Internal Revenue Code as amended by Republic Act Number 9337 and for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
671, an act granting public school students free admission to all public museums and national historical shrines and landmarks by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture.
672, an act institutionalizing peace education in the school curriculum at all levels by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance.
673, an act mandating the display of nutritional information on the menu of food establishments by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Health and Demography.
674, an act abolishing the National Coordinating and Monitoring Board and creating the National Commission for Senior Citizens, amending therefore Republic Act Number 7432 as amended by Republic Act Number 9257 as further amended by Republic Act Number 9994 by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, and Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation.
675, an act establishing a state-of-the-art and highly scientific sports complex to be known as the National Amateur Sports Training Center and appropriating funding thereof for the acquisition of property, construction of facilities, including administration, maintenance, and management of the same, and for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Sports, Ways and Means, and Finance.
676, an act declaring every 10th of February of each year as National Safer Internet Day in the Philippines by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Public Services and Science and Technology.
677, an act requiring financial institution to post transaction fees for each automated teller machine transaction and restricting transaction fees for automated teller machines by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies.
678, an act providing incentives for the mainstream use, manufacture, assembly, and conversion of electric, hybrid, and other alternative fuel vehicles and for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, Public Services, and Ways and Means.
679, an act amending Republic Act Number 8439, otherwise known as the Magna Carta for scientists, engineers, researchers, and others, S&T personnel in the government by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Science and Technology and Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation.
680, an act decriminalizing libel, repealing for the purpose Article 355 of Act Number 3815 as amended, otherwise known as the Revised Penal Code by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Public Information and Mass Media.
681, an act reorganizing the National Council on Disability Affairs into the National Commission on Disability Affairs, defining its powers and functions, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
682, an act strengthening and securing the rights of the urban poor against evictions and or demolitions and to provide adequate housing, amending for this purpose Republic Act Number 7279, otherwise known as an act to provide for a comprehensive and continuing urban development and housing program, establish the mechanism for its implementation and for other purposes, or the Urban Development and Housing Act of 1992 by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Urban Planning, Housing, and Resettlement.
683, an act prohibiting discrimination on the basis of ethnicity, race, religion, or belief, sex, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, civil status, and HIV status, and providing penalties therefore by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Cultural Communities and Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development.
684, an act providing for rural employment assistance program and appropriating funds thereof by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development, Local Government, and Finance.
685, an act creating the Philippines Trade Representative Office and appropriating funds therefore by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, Foreign Relations, and Finance.
686, an act including responsive, empowered, and service-centered youth and the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council in all levels, amending for the purpose Republic Act Number 10121, otherwise known as the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act of 2010 by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Youth and National Defense and Security.
687, an act institutionalizing the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development, and Finance.
688, an act institutionalizing the establishment of Philippine Big Data Center by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Science and Technology and Finance.
689, an act rationalizing the taxes imposed on non-life insurance policies, amending for this purpose sections 108, 123, 184, and 185 of the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997 as amended by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
690, an act providing for a Magna Carta of the Poor by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, Ways and Means and Finance.
691, an act amending Section 150 of Republic Act 8424, otherwise known as the National Internal Revenue Code as amended by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
692, an act amending Batas Pambansa Bilang 68, otherwise known as the Corporation Code of the Philippines by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship.
693, an act providing for a national framework for students' rights and welfare by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture.
694, an act creating a system of food purchase supporting local production and a program of distribution addressing the nutritional needs of children by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, Agriculture and Food and Finance.
695, an act amending Section 13B of Commonwealth Act Number 146 as amended and for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Public Services.
696, an act recognizing rideshare support companies, providing regulations governing their operations and clarifying the scope of Commonwealth Act Number 146, also known as the Public Service Law, the Tax Code, and the Land Transportation and Traffic Code, and other relevant laws by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Public Services.
697, an act adjusting the level of net taxable income and nominal tax rates for purposes of promoting the individual income tax, amending Section 24A, that's 2 of the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997 as amended, and for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
698, an act reducing the corporate income tax rate, amending Section 27 and 28 of the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997 as amended, and for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
699, an act providing for people's direct participation in funding charitable institutions and other development-oriented initiatives through a percentage of their personal income tax by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
700, an act strengthening the barangay unit through support for barangay officials and barangay volunteer workers, amending Republic Act Number 7160, providing funds therefore and for other purposes by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, Local Government and Finance.
Proposed Senate Resolution Number 89, recognizing and commending Idilin Diaz for winning silver medal in the weightlifting at the 2016 Summer Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, by Senator Joel Villanueva.
To the Committee on Rules.
9-0, congratulating and commending Idilin Diaz for securing the silver medal in the women's 52-kilogram division of the weightlifting competition in the 2016 Summer Olympics held at Rio de Janeiro, Brazil on 7 August 2016 by Senator Cynthia Villar.
To the Committee on Rules.
91, congratulating and commending Idilin Diaz for her exceptional performance in winning the silver medal for the Philippines in the 53-kilogram weightlifting competition at the 2016 Summer Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil by Senator Ejercito.
To the Committee on Rules.
92, directing the appropriate Senate committees to investigate in aid of legislation the report the destructive mining operations and illegal excavations in the province of Zambales, with the end in view of determining the extent of damage caused and the individuals to be held accountable therefore, and for the purpose of providing remedial legislations to further strengthen our environmental protection and conservation laws and address the possible breach to our national security by Senator Lacson.
To the Committees on Accountability of Public Officers and Investigations and Environment and Natural Resources.
And proposed Senate Resolution Number 93, congratulating and commending Idilin Diaz for winning the silver medal in the women's 53-kilogram weightlifting division of the 2016 Summer Olympic Games at Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, by Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy S. Binay.
To the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend the session for 1 Senate minute.
Session is suspended. Session is resumed.
Thank you. Mr. President, yesterday I presented the motion to transfer the referral of Senate Bill 216, or an act increasing the penalties for the refusal of hospitals to administer initial medical treatment, from the Committee on Justice to the Committee on Health, which I have withdrawn later on after Senator Drilon requested that the same be referred to the Committee of Rules Committee for review. So I went over the matter, and we found out that the original law, Republic Act 8344, which Senate Bill 126 intends to amend, was passed into law during the 10th Congress by the Committee on Health and sponsored by the Committee on Health, and it was likewise referred to that committee. So moreover, Senate Bill 216 likewise covers health policy, since the bill contains, among others, pregnancy-related complications as an emergency case. So with that, Mr. President, and I have informed Senator Drilon about the matter, Senator De Lima and Senator Hontiveros, I'd like to now reiterate my original motion to transfer the primary referral of Senate Bill 216 from the Committee on Justice to the Committee on Health as primary, and the Committee on Justice as secondary. I so move, Mr. President.
There is a motion to transfer the primary referral of Senate Bill number 216 to the Committee on Health and secondarily to the Committee on Justice. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, earlier we referred Senate Bill 692 to the Committee on Trade. It's an act amending Batasang Pambansa Bilang 68, otherwise known as the Corporation Code of the Philippines. Now, Senate Bill 81 and Senate Bill 231 have the same subject as Senate Bill 692, and these were referred to the Committee on Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes as primary, and the Committee on Trade as secondary. Therefore, I move, Mr. President, that we refer Senate Bill 692 to the Committee on Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Code as primary committee, and the Committee on Trade as secondary. So move, Mr. President.
There is a motion to transfer the referral of Senate Bill number 692 to the Committee on Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes as the primary committee, and the Committee on Trade as the secondary committee. Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
All right, Mr. President, just two more manifestations. As agreed by, well, with the concurrence of Senator Recto, who is the principal author of Senate Bill 867, I would like to manifest that the Majority Leader be made a co-author of Senate Bill 867.
What's the Senate Bill, sir, again? 867?
867. It's instituting estate tax reforms, Mr. President.
Co-author.
Yes, co-author. Thank you, Mr. President.
Does that need approval?
No, just the manifestation.
So the manifestation is noted.
And similar to that manifestation that I made yesterday, I would also like to manifest on behalf of the Chair of the Committee on Public Services, Senator Grace Poe, who will be conducting her first public hearing tomorrow, that Senate Bill 999, or the measure to grant emergency powers to the President to manage and solve traffic congestion, will be referred to the Committee on Public Services at the proper time. Just a manifestation so that they can continue talking about it when they have a hearing tomorrow. So,
So the manifestation
yes,
is
just a manifestation,
noted.
Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, August 10, 2016.
Any objection? There being none, the session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, August 10, 2016.